Hello everyone, welcome to the channel here of MeteoMark Weather. It's great to have you here. We're going to be starting off once again with the tropics. We're going to be watching an area across the Southern Caribbean, as well as an area just west of the Cape Verde Islands that could potentially develop into our next tropical storm. Could we see a hurricane out of one of these systems or both of them? Let's get into it. So starting off with our European model here, we're looking at our two systems here. As we head into Monday and Tuesday here. We got our system hanging up here across the Southern Caribbean, and we got a system over here just west of the Cape Verde Islands. Let's just scoot over here just a bit. You can see just west of the Cape Verde Islands, this is the area we're going to be watching. National Hurricane Center doesn't have our area outlined just yet in the Caribbean, but here, right south of Jamaica on the European model, you can see this thing starting to develop very slowly on the European model. More like a drawn-out area of low pressure, and I'll show you on the GFS continues to develop this thing. We have a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity continuing that persists through mid to late week here. So European model going a little bit weaker on this system, but a little bit further to the north as well. One thing to note is we do have that big area of high pressure blocking high off the U.S. East Coast here, which is good. And we have this trough kind of sitting up here along the southern Gulf of Mexico here in the Northern Caribbean. So that will continue to keep that system hopefully riding to the west here as we head out in time. Just a lot of heavy rain and storms being indicated here on the European model as we head out in here in time. So it's not developing it as highly as the GFS is, and I'll show you that momentarily. But let's get out here to Invest 94L here. You can see our system just west of the Cape Verde Islands really starts to move to the west and southwest here, west-southwest just initially. And then it's going to start pulling to the northeast. You see this high pressure up towards the Azores. That's going to start to round it about maybe towards the west-northwest, but this is the key here, this trough, this stalled out frontal boundary to the northwest. Let's see how the European model handles this here. So just pushing it just to the northeast here of the Virgin Islands or right near it. So this is anybody's game here in the Caribbean islands as we head towards October 18th into the 19th, just to the north of Puerto Rico there. So this run of the European model going a little bit further to the north of the Caribbean islands, and that could have implications here for the Bahamas, because this actually brings it into the Bahamas. You can see the southeastern Bahamas here with this stalled frontal boundary to the north, high pressure over Bermuda, and that, on this run, keeps the flow pattern towards the southern and eastern Bahamas here. Now look what starts to happen here towards October 22nd. You have this stalled out frontal boundary, so far this keeps the Gulf pretty safe, as well as the East Coast. It's going to be really close, though, so stay tuned, because things can change this far out, October 22nd. And the last few model runs here, brings this bending a little bit more towards the northeast and maybe deflecting here, because it really can't go that much further west because of the frontal boundary, or that further north because also the front and this big area of blocking high pressure. Now behind it, the European model continues to show the intertropical convergence zone sinking to the south here with more potential waves out here into the MDR. And look at the Western Caribbean just lighting up with tremendous moisture into the Central American countries. And looking at the GFS here, we can see a similar picture from the European model. We start to see this system really start to develop here in the Southern Caribbean, and that's going to be pushing towards the west-northwest here. So essentially, the GFS is really ramping this first storm up really fast here in the Southern Caribbean. And as you can see, as we get towards October 16th, this storm is becoming potentially a tropical storm and then a hurricane, forming an eye right around the 17th and 18th and bearing down on Nicaragua and Honduras here, and then eventually Belize. So depending on what track it takes and how far it stays out over the open water, we could see this thing ramp up into a potential hurricane and then produce some very heavy rains here for Central America. So it's looking better that this isn't going to get in fully into the Gulf of Mexico. So you may be able to breathe a sigh of relief up here into the Gulf. Now, looking at our next storm here, this is Invest 94L. So let's just back this up. We're tracking this storm west of the Cape Verde Islands here, just like we were on the European model. and the GFS developing right around the 16th and the 17th. Look how fast it's moving, though. So it's going to really book it here towards the islands, the Northeast Caribbean islands here. So any of the Caribbean islands here in the Eastern Caribbean are under a concern here that this is going to continue to develop. So we could be looking at a tropical storm or potential hurricane. This is October 18th here, bearing down on the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Keep in mind the margin of error is pretty great this far out. We get into the 19th and the 20th. It's near the Dominican Republic here. And then it starts to scoot its way further south into the Caribbean in response to a big frontal boundary. So this may save the Gulf again, but as we saw in the European model, things were a little bit further to the north. So it all depends on this frontal boundary. Look at this, the GFS bringing this into the just east of Jamaica here towards October 22nd, and it kind of gets hung up here as this trough really starts to stall. It actually starts to be drawn a little bit further to the north and to the east, and then developing a hurricane once again, and then spreading over Dominican Republic here. So, and then heading north here. So this is a little bit disturbing. Look at around this high pressure system over the Azores. Could this thing try to come up a little bit more north and east? Well, it's possible. Maybe keeping it away from the East Coast here. So that would be some good news. And then look at that. Behind here, we have a couple more waves lining up. Of course, one near Jamaica and Cuba here. And we have two more out here, one east of the Lesser Antilles and one west of the Cape Verde Islands. We're going to keep a watch out because this is crazy. It doesn't seem like the Cape Verde season wants to end here. So we could be looking at further development as we head through the rest of October. Wanted to make one quick note here for Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. As we continue throughout the week here, mid to late week, look at the surge of moisture on the east side of the system. So wherever this thing tracks, it's likely to bring up moisture on the northeast side. So that'll bring you some rain here from Jamaica, 17th, 18th, and 19th into the Cayman Islands as well. So we're not just looking at heavy rain from Nicaragua, Honduras, Belize, Yucatan Peninsula, and further inland here. That'll likely spread. And we'll also be looking at this potential system, see if it's actually going to recurve or head into the Western Caribbean as well. And before we continue with more model analysis here on our tropics and the rest of your weather forecast, don't forget, if you made it this far in the video and you like it, smash that like button, everyone. It really does help. Question or comment down below. I'd love to read your questions or comments. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe bell notification button so you're alerted with all my future weather video updates. Let's continue. So looking at our intensity guidance here for Invest 94L, you can see most of the models keep this right around tropical depression, tropical storm until, after about, 4 to 5 days here. Then it starts to develop it into a potential Category 1 ships model, bringing it up towards a Category 2. And one thing to note, Invest 94L and our Caribbean system both have extremely warm waters to work with here. Some as high as 3 to as much as 5 degrees Celsius above average here. This is running extremely high for this time of year. Thanks to Tropical Tidbits here for our dry air and moist air analysis here. As we continue to go out here in time, you can see there's our Southern Caribbean system, Invest 94 out here. Invest 94L seems to be entrained, surrounded with some dry air, and initially that does start to become a little bit of a problem. But as you can see, as we head through about October 17th here, both of our systems strengthening here on the GFS model, our Southern Caribbean as well as our MDR system out here. Moving through the Northeast Caribbean Islands, potential hurricane landfall here in Central America as we head towards next weekend, and then affecting parts of the Caribbean Islands here with Invest 94L. By that point, it'll probably be a tropical system. But look at one thing to note here on the GFS. This is really protecting the Gulf Coast and Southeast states and East Coast. High pressure, very dry high pressure behind this trough. That has helping deflect these systems. And as you can see, the system here in the Caribbean starts to move back towards the northeast around the base of this trough, as well as dry air that's coming in from this high pressure system. So this kind of pulls the system up towards the northeast. That appears to be what's happening. It does draw it north, so we'll have to continue to watch out for that potential. But that trough and high pressure blocking it to the east. But one thing to make notice here, Sunday, October 27th, look at this surge of tropical moisture coming into the Northwest Caribbean and another big surge out here into the MDR. It shows this system is, this season, hurricane season, is far from over, as we'll be watching from potential systems, especially from the MDR to the Caribbean here. Now looking at our European run, you can see a similar picture here. Invest 94L really battling some dry air initially. Lots of moisture across the southern and southwestern Caribbean. That continues to ride towards the northwest. Of course, our European model only developing our system out here into the MDR initially, keeping it, lower tropical storm status at that point. And continuing on here with our European coverage, you can see there it is, developing it into tropical storm potential. And our system across the Northwest Caribbean just kind of drawn out broad area of low pressure. So the European model's kind of hinting that maybe something could develop across the Western Caribbean, but not fully closing off the low, whereas the GFS is. But here it is, very similar location to the GFS for an Invest 94L system until you get, let me just back this up just a little bit, Monday, October 21st. The European model, there it is, positioning that stalled frontal boundary further to the north. High pressure is a little bit further to the northwest here and the northeast. That could allow this system to head a little bit more towards the northwest here into the Bahamas as a potential hurricane here. So this is something we have to keep a very close watch on. But one thing to note, by the 23rd, the European is kicking this out, as this trough starts to really, you see the tail end of this trough, blocking high, building in from the west and the northwest, could help to kick this system out towards the northeast. And looking at wind shear here, there it is on our European run. Here's our Invest 94L system out here. There is not too much wind shear to speak of as this system propagates across the Atlantic. Also into the Western Caribbean, this thing has virtually no wind shear, so there's no reason why I can't see why it won't develop, because it has high sea surface temperature content. And here's our Invest 94L system. It just continues to move towards the west, and if we get that out of the way, there we go. We can see Thursday, October 17th here. Quite a wound-up system here on our European run. With the only wind shear, you have to really get into the Gulf and off the southeast coast to the U.S. That's where you get into some decent wind shear. And it doesn't look like our tropical systems are heading that way anytime soon. As we continue through next weekend, you can see that wind shear kind of moves to the north up here, allowing our potential system, whatever happens with Invest 94L here over the southeastern Bahamas and Dominican Republic and Haiti. There it is moving to the north. If it does manage to move north into the Bahamas by the October 22nd timeframe, it does start to be affected by wind shear and may start to develop some extra tropical characteristics. But you can see across the Caribbean here, little to virtually no wind shear. But look at out here by the Cape Verde Islands. This is where you start to get into some bigger wind shear. So that may be a sign that maybe towards the end of the month here, we could start seeing the Cape Verde season finally begin to shut down. So if we look at our systems here, vorticity maxes and energy in the upper levels of the atmosphere and steering currents, you can see as we go out here in time, there's our Central America system, and well as our other system, Invest 94L, riding just on the southern edge of this ridge. And then you have this troughiness up here. So that keeps it on a west-northwestward jaunt here, just north of the Caribbean islands here on our European run, and then into the Bahamas. And then you start to see that troughiness may actually keep it away from the Gulf of Mexico and off the southeast states. And here we go. Let's look at the GFS run. You can see a similar picture here, whereas the GFS really blasting this up towards hurricane status near Nicaragua and Honduras. There's that high pressure. Our Invest 94L heading towards the Northeast Caribbean Islands here on the GFS. And then as this trough kind of kicks out to the north, it kind of allows the system to kind of bend a little bit more towards the southwest, towards the Caribbean area, just east of Jamaica. And then look what starts to form over just to the north here. This is a trough, a big area of low pressure, and that starts to pull it up towards the northeast. So this is also a feature that's not showing up as prominently here on the European run that could help to deflect this system more towards the northeast as it gets caught up into the westerlies here. Initially, it does start to head parallel to the North American coastline here, which is worrisome. But we do have a trough over here, as well as an area of high pressure building in behind it that could block this pretty readily. And that's showing up, pulling to the northeast by this time point. This is October 26th. So take it with a grain of salt. It's pretty far out at this point, but you can see we still have some energy out here to watch as we head through the end of October. And heading into the Caribbean here, rainfall amounts, Central America, the Caribbean islands. As we head throughout the week, we really start to see our system bubble up a lot of moisture. Whatever happens with this system, it doesn't matter whether it develops or not. We're going to see a lot of rainfall out of this. Even Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, you could see upwards of 60 to as much as 100 millimeters, getting up towards 2.5 to as much as 4 inches. Also towards Nicaragua, Honduras, Belize here, up towards the Yucatan, Guatemala. These areas could see easily 100 to maybe as much as 200 millimeters. That's getting you into the 4 to as much as 8-inch plus range. And heading to the Eastern Caribbean here, this is where we could see that system moving in from the west. As you can see here, we start to see some real heavy rains developing right around this region, and our system will continue to push towards the west here and the northwest, bringing some showers, 35 to as much as 60 millimeters. This could end up being more, though, depending on the track of our potential system. And I wanted to make note that GFS really increasing rainfall much more as it's further to the south, especially right over the Caribbean islands. This is where we could see 100 to as much as 150, 200 millimeters, 4 to 8 inches of rain, not out of the question. In the Bahamas, we're looking at the same here. HRRR future radar here as we continue through the rest of your Sunday evening here. You know, you can see just a lot of storminess up here across the eastern part of the lakes, parts of the Ohio Valley, Northeast, New England, just a wet time of it. So if you're trying to get out there and view some fall foliage, it may be a little inclement. Look at this. We got a line of convection coming through at around 9 p.m. Showery conditions continue through Lake Erie, Lake Ontario region, coming through Cleveland again around midnight here. So we're just going to continue to bubble up these showers and thunderstorms. How about Monday? Well, we do have a trough, kicking through on the backside of this low pressure. It's going to spark off continued scattered showers and thunderstorms. Continued lake effect enhancement with these as well. You can see the lake effect bands really start to stream off the lakes here through essentially later Monday into Tuesday here. You can see those lake effect enhancement bands setting up all the way through the 15th here through 8 a.m. So Tuesday morning, we're just going to continue some of this inclement weather. Now, as we look across much of the south, we're looking pretty dry here with the exception for South Florida. We actually do have that line of convection come through Sunday evening across much of the Mid-Atlantic and the Appalachians here. That weakens it has headed to the east. And then look at that. Much more drier conditions as we start out the week through much of the deep south and Gulf Coast areas. And looking here to picking up where our future radar left off, you can see that system up there in the northeast and Ohio Valley. That's pulling up towards the Canadian Maritimes and eastern New England areas as we head throughout the 14th here into the 15th. That's just going to leave an area of a troughiness behind it here. One of those troughs just setting up lake enhancement likely, unfortunately. It's going to keep your clouds and temperatures down at that point with cloud cover very high with that colder air crossing the Great Lakes, lake effect rain showers. But high pressure finally starts to build in here towards mid to late week as we see towards the 17th into the 18th. That just spreads to the east as we head through the 20th into the 21st. You do start to see into the 21st here, the next system round in the bend here from the northwest. That's going to be setting up that troughiness all the way down into the Carolinas and Georgia. That heads to the east coast as we head towards the 21st into the 22nd, high pressure building in behind it. But all eyes are going to be, on the tropics. See if we can keep these systems away from the United States so far. And looking at our precipitation amounts here, the lakes in the northeast, we could be looking at an additional close to 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch here in these purple zones. And throughout the week, some lake enhancement. But look at the tropical moisture. It stays pretty well squelched. Just clipping South Florida, maybe with up to an inch potentially through the Keys. Bahamas, you're really going to see those amounts total to like close to 4, 5, 6 inches. And then look at this, some return moisture on the backside of that high pressure system pushing up towards New Mexico and Texas. Maybe a couple inches of rain. Our Canadian weather forecast here as we continue through time. You can see as we head through Monday into Tuesday here, most of the inclement weather is going to be near both coasts. Here in southeastern Canada, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, and the west coast here towards British Columbia with those Pacific systems riding in. Really quiet with a 1034 millibar high in the central prairies here, central provinces, and that pulls away the storm system to the east as we head throughout the 17th into the 18th. You do start to see some moisture heading into Ontario as we head late week into next weekend. British Columbia staying very active. Look at this big massive low bombing up towards Hudson Bay. Very common this time of year. And then as we continue through the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, we get a lot of activity. Look at this. Western provinces, British Columbia, all the way to Saskatchewan, Manitoba. Successive run of storms here into the Canadian Maritimes as well. A big storm blasting up here from the Atlantic. And then we'll continue to watch for inclement weather as we head through Manitoba and Ontario as we head through the October 22nd time frame. So for our Canadian rainfall amounts here, mostly to the west and east coast, southeast Canada, we're looking through the third week of October here. Look at this. British Columbia, lots of mountain rain. Valley rain, I should say, mountain snow. We're looking at 100 to as much as 200 millimeters, 4 to 8 inches. Look at this here into Quebec, southeast Canada, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland here. We could easily see amounts totaling as much as 45 to 70 millimeters. We're looking at about 1.5 inches, close to 2 inches in many areas. And heading to the Western Pacific here, you can see there is not much to talk about here as we just continue this in time. The only thing we're concerned about, lots of rain continuing across the Philippines. Look how clear it is up here in Japan, South Korea here, Seoul, looking clear. Look at this, Shanghai all the way down to Hong Kong. You start to get into some showers here. Taiwan's looking pretty clear as well as we head towards the middle of the month. And as we continue this in time, do we have any chance of typhoons? Well, yeah, there's some waves out here, tropical waves, but you know what? There really isn't that much impact other than some heavy rain. So things are much quieter here as things ramp up in the Atlantic, of course. And looking to the Western Pacific here, you can see rainfall amounts. Yeah, initially, the Philippines looking pretty dry, and then it starts to moisten up here around the 21st, 22nd of October. Initially, we have some rain push up here towards South Korea as we head Monday into Tuesday, and then another one towards Friday. But for the most part, we're going to dry it out. That's going to be the trend across Southeast Asia once we get rid of some of this heavy rain moving in from the southwest. But many areas could see 100, maybe 150 millimeters. So that monsoon-type rains continuing even to the far stretches of South Asia as well. And before we continue with more weather, check out these awesome, amazing maps that you won't find anywhere else.
I am proud to announce that I am now an affiliate with Trilogy Maps. TrilogyMaps.com, bringing you the most digital, customizable maps found nowhere else on the internet. These maps are simply stunning. It's an advanced layering system that makes these maps great for making forecast maps with ease or any other maps that you would like to display important information on. The resolution on these maps is simply amazing. From the detail of everything here in the States, and you can also create stunning, digital, professional layered maps from also across the entire world. And don't forget, in checkout, the discount code option, use my code, MeteoMark, hit apply, and you will get 20% off your order. So if you want the most professional, customizable, and affordable weather maps found nowhere else on the internet, look no further than TrilogyMaps.com. Link in the description down below along with your discount code.
And temperature-wise, it is going to feel a lot colder here on Monday. Look at this, up mid to upper 40s into parts of the eastern Great Lakes, northeast, northern New England. It's going to be chilly, even 60s all the way down to North Georgia here in the Appalachians. And if we head into Tuesday, look at this. This just continues very, very fall-like up here. 50s and even some 40s, just continuing very warm across Texas, though, into the 90s. And watch this, as we head into Wednesday, we just continue that trough. We do see evidence, though, that things are going to start warming up here northeastward as we go throughout the week into Thursday. Look at this. We're rebounding into the upper 50s and 60s here into the northeast. Look at these 70s and even some 80s out into the midsection of the country. Look at that, 60s all the way down to the Carolinas here as well on Friday, October 18th. Things are warming up though. We get into next weekend and it definitely won't feel that fall-like. Look at that, we'll get into the 60s and even some 70s into parts of the Ohio Valley. Extended forecast from our hometown viewers, Binghamton to Scranton, Upper Susquehanna River Valley of New York and Pennsylvania. It's going to be a cold start to the week here. Unsettled lake effect rain showers Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Highs held into the 40s. Very windy as well. It'll feel a lot colder and damp. But look at this. By Thursday into Friday, sunny skies, clearing conditions as high pressure builds in. We'll make it to the lower to mid 60s by Friday. As always, thank you for joining me for this edition of MeteoMark's Weather. Also, don't forget to join me on Facebook at MeteoMark, also Weather Northeastern, also Twitter at Weather Eastern. Don't forget it's MeteoMark.com, and don't forget, if you want to send me a coffee, there is a link, Super Thanks. You can smash that Super Thanks button or my PayPal link in the description down below. You can buy me a cup of coffee. Thanks, everyone. Share that video. Subscribe if you haven't. Smash that like button.